folks for being here. I thought Gary was going to do an introduction, but he's skedaddled. So for those of you who don't know me, I'm Sue Alcock. I met this lovely Lady Dell yesterday. It's other wonderful people. True to form, I've learnt names and they're gone. But I am here today, don't ask me why. I'm going to be talking about the Jewish connection with Manitou Beach. For many years, people have been saying, well, the Jewish people used to come here, the Jewish used to come here. But people always seem to be happy to know or curious about the Jewish connection here, Jewish people who came here. And for some unknown reason, me, British, not born and bred here, kind of a designated import. I kind of ended up following up the pathways of research. Over a couple of autumns ago, when plans were being made for this year's centennial celebrations, somebody was saying, you know, we need to know more about the Jewish people. And there's a little bit of a buzz, and I thought, oh, yeah, this kind of fits for me. So I put myself to work. And it's been a very interesting time. Locally, I don't think we have any Jewish people in the community, or if we do, I don't know. Is there anybody here who happens to be Jewish? Okay, so we're all on the same page here, not knowing a whole lot. If you can't hear me, move forward. I'm just getting over a cold and laryngitis and tonsillitis. And I also have to say too, this past week, because of the bug, and because this week in our family has been quite, in some ways challenging, in some ways difficult, in some ways a relief. My mother-in-law, who is 97, will be moving into Jubilee Court probably tomorrow. So there's been some emotional things going on through the past week. So the talk that I was going to give, it's not going to be so polished. It's going to be here and there and there and here, because it's not really organized so well. And then a couple of days ago, I thought, I still don't like it. I'm going to do this instead. So I guess I'm functioning on a wing and a prayer. And your patience, I would appreciate questions. Or if I feel, oh, it looks like I've gone on a totally way off tangent, just bring me back, please. I won't be offended. Yeah, like, Sue, where were you? But what I decided first is we need to know a little bit about the Jewish people and their history, where they're from, what they've been through. Because life hasn't been a bowl of cherries for the Jewish people. And this is Bev, our wonderful photographer. No.
I was trying to sneak in.
Tom
to get your good side.
Tom complains that my hearing is too good. Okay. Bear with me. Like I said, okay. Oh, I do have to share something with you. This is from Sid Buckle, former mayor of Saskatoon. The first generation of Jews in Saskatoon were penniless immigrants working very hard, learning a new language and a new way of life. The second generation became educated and successful. The third generation have been brilliant achievers in a wide variety of fields, working in many parts of the world, but always remembering Saskatoon as their home. And I didn't have a whole lot of communication with Saskatoon Jewish people, but they have got a phenomenal history book, which was a great reference book. It's like a cousin or a sister or a brother to our prairie reflections. Now, the history bit. Judaism, sorry, I'm going to read some of this. C'est la vie. It's a very ancient religion. and stems from the time of Moses and Abraham in the Middle East over 3,500 years ago. These folks have been around a heck of a long time. And Judaism is also one of the oldest monotheistic religions, meaning one God. In belief system, the Jews believe that God appointed Jews to be his chosen people in order to set an example of holiness and ethical behavior in the world. Judaism has no dogma, no formal set of beliefs that one must hold to be a Jew, and they believe that actions are more important than beliefs. There are actually 13 principles of faith. I'm not going to go into those. If you'd like to know more, there's this wonderful thing called the internet. And I ended up in places like Judaism 101, Jewish Wikipedia, BBC, and a few others, even an Australian website. Because I wanted information that I could understand, because I was starting off at the bottom rung, trying to understand. Let's see. And the Jewish Bible, which is also called the Hebrew Scriptures and the Old Testament, it's organized into 3 parts. The Torah, or teachings, which tell the story from creation to the death of Israel. The prophets, and the writings. I thought it was just a straightforward Christian Old Testament book, but I understand that in the Jewish Bible, the books are in a different sequence. And some people may know that, some people may not know that, and some people don't. I don't. The first 6 books tell of the history and genealogy of people and Israel. The next 7 books continue their story into the Promised Land. And the last 11 books contain poetry, theology, and additional history. And the Jewish calendar, I didn't know there was a Jewish calendar. It is based on the moon cycles. And within that year, they do have high holy days such as Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, and there are 3 pilgrimage festivals, Passover, Shabbat, and I'm not sure how to say this, Sukkot, S-U-K-O-T, anybody?
Yeah.
Sukkot. Oh, thank you. And it was the reading Yom HaShoah, and I read that, I thought, oh. And I discovered it's a more recent holiday. It recognizes the over the 6 million Jews who were martyred in the Holocaust at the hands of the Nazi regime. That touched me. Here in North America, most Jewish people are Ashkenazi, and they are from Europe, mostly Eastern Europe. Sephardic Jews are mostly from Spain, Portugal, and North Africa. And last year I discovered there are Jewish people in China too. I knew about Ethiopia, but I did not know about China. Then I discovered Rabbi Sachs. Anybody heard of Rabbi Sachs? No? Oh, that's fine. How to explain this term? I don't even know how to say it, but it's a form of social justice and charity, that Jewish people support each other and help each other. It's a vision of community where none will lack for food or clothing or a chance to work, where none are shunned or forgotten, whether they are in prison, in hospital, aged, or alone. This vision arises from Tzedakah. Can you help me out? No? Okay. But I think this is a way how Jewish people have helped themselves throughout the centuries, helping to keep their communities together by working together and helping each other out. And is that enough history? You're familiar with the Jewish diaspora, where people got pretty much chased out of Palestine and ended up in different parts of the world. Okay, I like to skip this page. This is where I need feedback from you guys. Okay. So we're recalling that the Jews were persecuted, Romans moving into Palestine, and in the centuries following, more upheavals for them, exile from Spain if they did not convert. In Britain banned the Jewish people as well. And now we're moving to 1700, Pale of Settlement. Any European history buffs here? Me neither. The Pale of Settlement was the area in Europe where many people were forced to live since the reign of Catherine II of Russia. And it included today's Poland, Russia, Ukraine, Lithuania, Belarus, and Moldavia. And this is the area where many of the people who came here originated from. It could have been their parents or their grandparents, but this is predominantly where they came from in Europe. Many of them were fleeing from the Jewish pogroms. A pogrom is a Russian word meaning to wreak havoc and demolish things by violence. These were violent attacks by the local non-Jewish populations on Jews in the Russian Empire and other countries. The first one was in Odessa in 1821. And these pogroms continued for over the next 100 years. And horribly disruptive. Remember the musical Fiddler on the Roof? That's what that family was fleeing. That's what caused the disruption of that family. So take away the cutesy musical business and put it into real life. People were fleeing for their lives to get away from looting, persecution, violence, rape, murder. They had to get out for their own sake. Which brings us now to good old Watrous and Manitou Beach. There were some families that came here. I'm going to start with the Nemitz family. Some of you, well, if you've all read Prairie Reflections from cover to cover, there are portions there about the Nemitz family. These brothers started coming over one by one in the early teen years and set up businesses in Watrous. One of them in particular, Charlie, he was quite the wheeler-dealer character, and you could read that one day he was opening up a business, he was bankrupt, then he was starting up another business, he had a car dealership business. But with his brothers, and especially Sam, the engineer, they got the electricity going in Watrous. And it was another brother, David, who put the pole line from Watrous to Manitou Beach in 1924-25 to bring electricity to Manitou Beach. And Charlie, the wheeler dealer, also at the west end of the beach in the 1920s built the California rooms with the Manitou Beach Cafe, which had capacity for 90 people to sit in the dining room. And when they arrived, they did not know they had to learn English, but they were very bright people, and they seized the opportunity of what was happening at the beach at that time, and the pioneer town of Watrous. One of their sisters, she and her husband, for a number of years in the 1920s, operated a grocery store down on Main Beach, on the site where the chalet pool became, and where Manitou Springs is now, was the Manitou Supply Store, owned and operated by Jewish people. Somebody made the comment to me, in the early days, just about every prairie town would have had a Jewish grocery store, and maybe a couple of other Jewish businesses, the Chinese restaurant, maybe the Chinese laundry, and that is how local other people became familiar with Jewish people and Chinese people. And there seems to be an acceptance of the Jewish people. The local newspaper, at that time the Watrous Signal, did acknowledge, well, the Nemet store is closed. They're going off to Saskatoon to celebrate a high holiday, probably Rosh Hashanah, and various other things like that. In the 1930s, Dr. Sam Lander, who was part of the Jewish family from Saskatoon. Yoo-hoo, Tim! Sorry, Tim. I couldn't resist. I'm sorry. But the Lander family, they arrived in Saskatchewan in a different way. Remember the Hirsch colonies, the Jewish colonies that were set up in different parts of the province? The Lander family came to the Hirsch colony and tried to go at farming. But Mr. Lander was actually a blacksmith over in the old country and discovered that the railroad needed metal workers. So he moved to Saskatoon and started working with the railroad, doing railroad work, and established an ironworks factory in Saskatoon, which eventually became the Lander Auto Body Shop. How am I doing? Am I boring you to death?
Oh, it's interesting.
Oh, good. Okay, back to the game plan. The Manitou Beach Hotel. This was built in 1919. Initially built and organized and run by local businessmen, but it was taken over by a Jewish couple, Pearl and Travis Israel. And Pearl was still running the place when it broke down in 43. I really don't know much about that family at all because this was a recent, the light went on. Her marriage was recorded in the Jewish newspaper in Yiddish. Of course they were Jewish. And until the Manitou Beach Hotel, more or less across from downtown, or maybe slightly across the road and slightly east. So that was a new revelation for me. And I think people here are aware that it was the west side of the village where most of the Jewish people would be collecting and holidaying and so on. I did put together a map because I had access to the village records. And whoever I recognize as being a Jewish person, I mapped them. So there's like maybe that many places over on the east side and for the west side. So that's local story bears true. Do I carry on with the businesses, the people, or do you want to hear about the synagogue?
Yes. House of David.
Wrong, House of Abraham.
In the book it was the House of David.
I know. However, thanks to research, this is what happens with research. You hear this, and if you can't verify it, you go with the story that's happening. Then later on, information appears. It's like, oh my heavens, here's proof. It was the House of Abraham. And do you know how we know it was the House of Abraham? The check was written and stamped by the bank. It's the House of Abraham. It's like, oh. And you know, there'll be more of those incidences happening. So I'm glad you raised that point. Because for the longest time, I thought it was the House of David.
On Winnipeg Street.
Yeah, I don't broadcast where it is, because it's a private cottage now. However, very, very recently, I received an oral history recording. It was, the recorder was Phil Dayson, related to the Nemetz family. And the lady being interviewed was Mrs. Zoe Gropper, born in 1918. I said 1918. She comes across in this interview loudly, clearly, confident, knows what's going on. She could have been in her 70s or 80s. She's a very with it woman. It was lovely listening to this interview. Her daughter was part of it, and a daughter-in-law. So at times I couldn't hear everything because they were all excitedly talking. So if any of you are recording family histories, hold one thing up, that person is the speaker. However, I had sent to them things that, could you please ask Mrs. Gropper about? Because we really would like to know. And of course, I wanted to know more about the synagogue. And I knew from a conversation from Mr. Cliff Wright of Saskatoon that there was the synagogue on where we were talking about, and he also made reference, I'm sure there was a synagogue in the Lakeview Hotel, but I don't know for sure, but I really think there was. And I don't think Cliff Wright was Jewish. And I keep meaning to ask Lionel to clarify, but so I thought, okay. Other people, no idea, couldn't tell you. So that was left on the back burner until this potential interview with Mrs. Gropper. And you know, she was able to confirm there was a synagogue in that hotel. Which is like, we've learned something new. And now you're wondering, the Lakeview Hotel, what hotel? The Lakeview Hotel was also known as the Jewish Hotel. When it was first built and run and owned and operated, it was by a Jewish couple, the Komarovskis, from Winnipeg. And I was reading up about synagogues and shuls, and I thought, you know, for a couple of months in the summer, it would be so easy, tidy up the dining room and hold prayers there. I still don't know if that happened or where they did their prayers in the Lakeview Hotel, but something was happening there. And then in the mid-1940s, the hotel changed hands, and Mr. and Mrs. Bay, Abe and Frida Bay, bought the hotel. And this is where there was another gold mine, because thanks to this entire project, I put an article into the Jewish Post and News asking for people to contact here through the village office if they had stories they wanted to share. And this wonderful, beautiful, sweet old guy in his 90s tracked me down and sent an email. I thought, this is amazing. And his wife was the daughter of Abe and Frida Bay. Now his wife Doris was able to share little bits about the hotel, but at her age, she wasn't quite well enough. She was having memory problems, but her sister Minnie, who actually is Minnie Bell, Mrs. Minnie Bell, I kept thinking, Tinkerbell? No, it's Minnie Bell. A very delightful lady. We had a number of conversations over the phone, and she started coming out to the hotel with her parents to help run the hotel. She could carry 3 plates on her arm. And she was talking about the meals, the food. And I did ask her, was there a synagogue in the hotel when your parents owned it? No. Okay. But she did share a lot about the meals that they served there and the kosher diet there, because that was part of the Jewishness. And I did look up kosher foods, kosher diet, kashrut, and I thought, this is too complicated for me to try and explain. But there are certain dietary laws that are followed by those who wish to. Some will follow it, some will not. And it's interesting reading. I've got a few pages here, or at home, one or the other. Now we're going back to the synagogue. So we've established now, in the Bay's time, there was not a synagogue in the Lakeview Hotel. Mrs. Gropper says yes, there was in the Lakeview Hotel in the time that she knew. She was coming here in the 20s and 30s as a child and teenager. She got married in 1938 or 39, and she had a wonderful time in Manitou Beach. So, the synagogue down the road, that building was owned by Mr. Sam Birnbaum from Saskatoon. He passed away in 1945, but that was the building that became the synagogue. I don't know if it was willed to the community by him, but for a few years it was under his name. And then in the village tax records, it was recorded as the Jewish synagogue. And that's how it happened for a number of years. Now, of the people that replied to the article in the Jewish Post and News, The editor was lovely. He did not charge. He was happy to do this. He said, let me know if you get any replies. So I was happy to be able to call him back and say, yes, we did get replies, thank you, and they were wonderful. A gentleman, Cyril Labman, a lawyer from, actually originally he grew up in Moose Jaw, came here for summer holidays for a few years in the 40s or the early 50s with his parents. He recalls going to the synagogue, and it would be the one down the street here, with his uncle, with his dad and his uncle and his cousins. I don't know if they were all male relatives or if some of the females came too, but that's all he could recall. I never was, for anybody that I was asked who knew about that synagogue, they did not know anything about the contents. So I have nothing to share with you there. Thanks to Mr. Cyril Labman though, because he really got onto this project. And he was chasing friends, and he got a friend who was a crazy researcher. He really was. And they sent information in, some useful, some not. The most valuable piece that I think was, he sent it was a tiny, tiny little print, 2 sentences in somebody's obituary. Mr. Hyman Goodman was president and founder of the synagogue here at Manitou Beach. So, oh, and he was a rail worker from Winnipeg, because I Googled him and I found out a little bit more. But heavily engrossed in his church and community. Not all the Jewish people who were movers and shakers in the church were heavily educated people. They were holding down regular jobs but devoted to their church and their faith and working with each other. How's that for the synagogue? What else would you like to ask? Oh, the Lakeview Hotel. Oh, sorry. It was, okay, you know where the chalet pool was? Manitou Springs Hotel. Okay, go to the next block west. There was the Whitmore Hotel, Carlsbad, right on the corner there. And the Mauritania became Gus Human's health clinic. It was right next door to the health clinic. And then on the other side was there was a gas station. And I remember Mr. Curtin telling me about the gas station and 2 of the cottages that were on that site. And good time for a pause. So, thanks to going back to the Nemitz family, Shirley Bonnet, daughter of Esther, and uncle and Charles and Dave and Sam were her uncles. She discovered, we've been contacting for a long time, and she sent the family history, and because she fell in love with the fact that there's a heritage centre going up in Rochester that encompasses our communities, she decided, because I approached her about this project too, so she hustled a few people in her sphere, and that generated more stories. And yes, in the early years, the ladies were coming, you know, they were grandmothers. They were coming because of the lake quarter. They were benefiting. They needed rheumatism, arthritis. These dear sweet ladies were soaking in the hot baths. Guys were floating in the lake, and they started coming. The train made from Winnipeg, Saskatoon, made it easier to get here too. It was sort of a very central location. And the people that I was talking with this year, last year, these would have been the children and the grandchildren. So they came as teenagers in the 40s and the 50s. And their view was, we had a wonderful time at Manitou Beach. We were socializing, we were meeting friends from here, there, and everywhere, who were also Jewish people. We loved the water, the berries, the food, swimming, socializing. One dear sweet guy, Hirsch learner. Here's another family with strong connections to Rochester and Manitou Beach. way back, there was in the 1920s and 30s, there was a store, the Marco Lerner, was it the Lerner Marco store? And they also had a cottage here at Manitou Beach. And Mo Lerner lived here. His wife and children lived in Winnipeg, where they received their education. Hirsch was the youngest of 5. There was 17 years between him and an older brother. And so Hirsch and his cousin, Max Marco, they would be in the summertime swimming across the lake and having a wonderful time. And this particular time, they decided they would swim across the lake, and on the way back, they pretended they were drowning. So they needed to be rescued. So Big Brother goes and rescues them and discovers what they've been up to. So the boys were not allowed into the lake again that summer. So they were in trouble. But both of Hershey's older brothers became physicians. And I believe it was Alec who interned with Dr. Stipe at the medical clinic here. Now Alec Lerner and his brother, they both served in World War II with the Army Medical Corps. And Alec ended up marrying into the Marks and Spencer's family in Britain and ended up in Israel doing things with all things Israeli. Remember, the country of Israel was established in 1948. Hershey's story, probably late 30s, early 40s. No, it had to be the late 30s because his brothers were gone by the 40s, by 1940. And the Lerner store was sold to Manny, well, he went to Manny Spector's uncle first, and then Manny and his wife moved to Watrous and operated the store for a number of years. Manny was an engineer by profession. However, because of the times, he was not allowed, he couldn't find work as an engineer. He ended up working in his mother-in-law, in the in-laws store, Kroll's in Yorkton, and being a traveling salesman. That's what he was doing to make a living. So when the opportunity came to take over the uncle's store in Watrous, it seemed like a good thing. And in another weird way of communication, I ended up corresponding with his daughter, Terry May, who is now a retired teacher in Winnipeg. So we were emailing back. She was very good friends with Janie Alcock, Teresa Elvis. She was taught by Lionel Sproul. And she was, through these letters, she said, how is so-and-so? How is so-and-so? Okay, I think they're doing fine. I think, okay, I'll ask Tom. I'll ask my mother-in-law. You know, but anyway, Terry May, one of the things she shared was, because I had to ask her, did you experience any anti-Semitism in Watrous? She said no. But in another email, well, you know, the farm kids treated me better. And I got the sense from something else that she wrote that the rail kids weren't so nice. So I thought, okay, there are undercurrents there. And I thought about it a bit more. I thought, oh, how badly does anybody want to acknowledge that they have been bullied, harassed, people being mean to you? It's not something that you share openly and freely. I know I don't. I wouldn't. There are experiences that have happened in my life that I don't share. There's too much shame. I haven't got over the shame part. A few people do know. Anyway. But would you like to know how I found, or how Terry May found me, or I found Terry May?
Sue, I think they'd be interested in knowing where the Spector's store was, that it's where the pepper tree is. A lot of people wouldn't know that.
Yeah, I remember it. I went to school with Wayne.
Okay.
Yeah,
Wayne's
yeah,
better.
Terry.
Yeah, and I'm sorry to tell you Wayne has since passed away.
Wayne did.
Yeah. Yeah, he passed away maybe, I think the year before I made contact with Terry. I think it was yeah. I understand he was a trail fanatic.
Yeah, he was kind of hefty like me.
But yeah, specters.
I do have a question.
Sure.
In your research, how many of the Jewish people have were assimilated into the Manitou society?
Sorry, can you say that
How
again?
many of the Jewish people were assimilated into the Manitou society and not just Jewish or Jewish? Was there a lot of things that happened? Or a lot of them retained their Jewish faith, or what happened there? Did you encounter anything?
Actually, Mr. Phil Dayson has answered your question. He said the Jewish people were accepted in the prairie towns where they settled, running their businesses and so on, and they were very open with their Jewishness. So,
Why I say that, I know some Jewish families are just normal farmers.
Yeah.
They don't practice their Jewish faith.
well, actually, not all Christians practice their Christian faith.
Precisely.
Yeah.
But they're such race, aren't they?
We perceive them as a race.
Because we have a melting pot concept in Canada, or this is you might have all lost some of the people there.
I suspect that there are some Jewish people, this is me thinking how people are, that you can be Christian and not.
I was just wondering, did you ever encounter anything in your research in respect to that, or?
No, and I can be surmising, sort of thinking of, as human beings, we're much of a muchness. And some people will call themselves Christians, but they don't do anything about it, they don't practice it. And others will to the nth degree. I know some of the Jewish people that I was in contact with, they would make reference to some of their relatives. Well, yeah, they're Jewish, but they don't practice it.
Yeah.
They don't follow it. Does that help you? Does that help answer?
Sort of, but I guess you didn't encounter that in your research.
You see, my research was mostly emails and telephone calls, and not face-to-face, because when you have a face-to-face conversation, people will share things differently. So, I know there's been an amazing amount of bias against Jewish people. So some people will be, oh, this is human beings, isn't it? You're nice on the surface, and then you make the snide comments after they're gone. You know, and we're bad for that. We're all, yeah. Unfortunately, we have to do better, I think. So do we know where Spectre Store was? Yeah, where the pepper tree is, yeah.
The old drugstore.
Yeah, because the Spectre sold it to Charlie Elvis. Yeah.
And the Spectre store was in groceries.
It seemed like they had groceries and dry
It was
goods.
all dry goods.
You know, folks, it's 10 to 12. Yeah. I just have to share something else with you. Camp Easter Seal.
Well,
Dr. Alvin Buchwald, part of the Sid Buchwald Jewish family from Saskatoon, he was instrumental in the establishment of that. He was a pediatrician from Saskatoon, and he wanted to help the children who were in need of help, physically disabled people needing help. Really?
so who built Camp Easter? That was, we always heard that was the rich Max Hotel.
That was a government project. The builders would have been the relief workers in the very, very early 30s. And
So is the Jewish connection here, because a lot of people would come to the thought, you'd always wonder why Manitou the license plates everywhere. I guess it was just because other people had businesses and they had big families and their friends or whatever would come.
Well, initially because of the spa circumstance, because a lot of people from Eastern Europe would have known about the spa towns in Europe.
Right.
So the fact that there was some mineral water here would have been a drawing point.
Yeah.
And it kind of took off.
That they would be more familiar with from your
Well,
understanding. Spa is good for
Well,
you.
actually, at the beginning of the century, all the immigrants would have been familiar
Right.
as we kind of moved in and took over.
Did you find anything about, like, it was very strong Jewish community here at one point. They seem to have moved on. Do we know why? They're not as prevalent now.
I don't know that 3 or 4 families, or maybe there were more than 3 or 4 families in Montrose. I don't know if that would make it a strong community.
Well, I'm just saying there was a lot of Jews here at one point, and there are
There
not
were-
Jewish people known here now. There's no
Yeah,
synagogue.
there were certainly a lot of visitors down here with cottages. I would say, as the families grew, the kids left home.
They just moved on and never.
Many of them that I saw and read about went on to university and scattered across the province or across the country. Some ended up in Israel. Many seem, the Nemitz family, for example, by the end of the 20s, most of them had moved to Vancouver and flourished there.
And the railroads changed too, for bringing them,
Yeah.
from Winnipeg. That was a big thing.
Yeah, and of course the Depression as well. World War II would have affected things. One of the, Cyril Labman, he was coming here as a child, and then a Jewish camp for the kids opened up somewhere else, so that's where he started to go. And of course, as parents age, they're not so inclined to be coming back here.
But there's hardly any Jewish community here now.
I'd say there's none.
Yeah.
Or if there is any, we just don't know. But the synagogue, I think, just sort of disappeared in the 60s. 60s and 70s was when it went. And that ties in with kids, teenagers who were here in the 30s and 40s, off to university, off to follow their careers. And the economy changed too. Nobody really gave me a reason, they just went.
Okay, I was just trying to something happen, but nothing specific. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Anything else? Mike?
Okay,
Any
I just
ga-
wanted to say this, it's not about the people here, they have,
I'm sorry, I can barely hear you.
sorry, there has been like evidence that the Native people in North America have a connection to the Hebrews. And there was, like on YouTube, they have found, like, I can't remember what the guy's name is, Elderino, I think it is, but anyway, they found down in America, on one of the reserves, they have found what appears to be the 10 Commandments written in Hebrew on native land. And there was also a story about an explorer who came to North America. He encountered the First Nations, and they were there for about a month, but they couldn't communicate. And this explorer was a Dutch explorer, and they were there, like I say, for about a month, and couldn't communicate, and they kept trying different languages, and nothing, just nothing. And anyway, so the first mate and captain were speaking one day, and they were speaking in Hebrew, and the chief heard them and responded in Hebrew.
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah. So like I say, they're finding more and more evidence that about the connection between them.
Yeah, because actually when you consider how people have moved over the centuries, why not?
Yeah.
You know, because I remember some years ago there was something about, I think it was Ethiopia, that they found this particular group of people and that didn't quite fit in, and different religious ceremonies or rites were being practiced. Nobody really realized what they were. And then somebody from elsewhere, an archaeological team or religious group went in there and realized these people are practicing a very ancient form of Judaism. And oh, was this one of the lost 10 tribes?
Yes. Yeah. That's kind of what the connection.
Because people do move around and they take their customs with them.
Yeah.
And if they live in a very enclosed place, they hang on to them.
Yeah.
And then whereas the rest of the world will be changing and evolving, they would. So anyway, I hope I've shared something of value with you. I do thank you for coming and listening and bearing with me. Thank you, Mary. This has been a long project in the making. It represents a heck of a pile of time sitting at the computer or on the phone. Oh, good. And I like to think in time it may become more polished and better organized. Oh, it's huge, and it gets bigger every time you open the window and look at a word. I discovered Minion 2 days ago, and it's a quorum of 10 Jewish people for a prayer meeting. Some people in one of the churches it would have to be 10 males. In other ones, the Reform, it could be in either sex. So, oh, that's right. It's Minian. Anyway, I'm going to be quiet and wait till lunchtime.